In this daily drop, I'm going to give you some of my initial thoughts on the brand new and just announced Canon C80. So let's go. All right, everybody, week is coming to an end quite soon. Only 2 more episodes this week for the daily drop. And a busy week it has been, both for me personally, work-wise, and also in terms of new equipment announcements. We have IBC starting on September 13th. That goes through the 16th of September. And historically, and this year is no exception, there are usually new product announcements that happen before the show. We have what I'm going to be talking about briefly in this episode, the Canon EOS C80. A little bit of a surprise, not completely out of left field, but definitely something that I think a lot of people didn't think was going to be announced before this show, IBC, in Amsterdam. And then we have other new equipment, new lenses from Cooke, and a lot of other companies. We have the new Aperture 1200X, which has brand new light engine technology. So, that along with the iPhone 16 and 16 Pro announcement, and there's quite a few things happening in the equipment space right now. So I kind of, whether it's right or wrong, have a bit of a reputation of being a Canon person. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that over the past decade and a half, I have been hired by Canon to produce, direct, and put together educational content in and around many of their DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, and also cinema EOS camera systems. And so I have that reputation, though in reality, while I have shot many, many projects on Canon's DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, and cinema EOS camera systems, I also have shot lots of projects on Red. I've shot lots of projects on Fuji cameras, lots of projects on Panasonic cameras, lots of projects on RE cameras, and a lot of projects on Sony-based camera systems. So it's not a play favorites type of situation. I have probably owned more Canon cameras than anything else, but I've owned a lot of Sony cameras, Fuji cameras, so on and so forth. So my perspective doesn't come from being what people like to say, for some people, a fanboy, but really from the perspective of what is the right camera. There's no perfect camera for the type of project that you are going to be working on. So I think I'm not a review person, and I'm taking this from the perspective of what this camera is in today's market and how I see it. And of course, this comes on the C80's announcement, comes on the heels of the Canon EOS C400, which also wasn't necessarily a big surprise. That camera, along with the C80, were cameras that I think we thought we were going to see in the future. And the C80, to be more specific, really is the least expensive full frame RF mount cinema camera with built-in neutral density filters that Canon makes and is going to be releasing. R5 C, of course, has most of the core ingredients that we would look at for a cinema camera, but there's no built-in ND. It's missing lots of those ports that we would expect out of a digital cinema camera. They're all mirrorless cameras. And for me, the R5 C is really sort of that true hybrid camera, especially now that you boot it up in stills mode and also in the cinema, basically menu system mode. And a very capable camera. It's giving you something that you're not going to get out of the C80, which is 8K acquisition. But that said, there's a lot of things about the C80 that I think people are going to like. First and foremost is the price point. It's coming in at about $5,500 US, as opposed to the, I think, correctly priced $8,000 US or just under for the EOS C400. What's really nice about this announcement and the timing of it, in my opinion, is while they're not dropping, meaning the C400 and the C80 at exactly the same time, they are really, in my opinion, the A/B kind of camera ideal, because they have the same exact sensor in those camera bodies. So if you don't need things like Genlock and a few of the other ports that are available on the C400, you may look at the C80 as sort of your A and B camera situation, and you get two of those cameras for about $11,000 US. Whereas if you were looking at two C400s, Pi's ready. I gotta mute that thing one of these days. Then you'd be looking at about $16,000 US just for the camera bodies themselves. Now you could go one C400 and one C80, which is something I think a lot of people will do. And then of course you split the difference in terms of the price there. But again, I don't think from an image standpoint, you're losing on a lot of things. There are for sure some capture modes and some format/codecs that you're missing on the C80. When you're looking at that camera as a full frame 6K camera system, you are more limited in terms of the cinema raw light features. Would have loved to have seen an XAVC type codec for 6K in the camera system. But as it is, you are getting 4K oversampled, very clean footage out of that camera. And I'm not too worried about the triple ISO as opposed to DGO type of approach. There were probably decisions being made by Canon related to that had a lot to do with making sure other feature sets like the upgraded dual pixel AF version 2 was doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And it seems like, though I need some real world practical experience with the camera, that Canon has finally come back up to where they need to be for autofocus, because for the last couple of years or so, I really feel like it's been Sony's game when it comes to AF and just having rock solid autofocus capabilities. I think in the C400 and the C80 that Canon is basically there. And it's really nice to see something in this price point with these features that is a full frame, again, RF mount cinema EOS camera system. So for me, the body style is okay. They've definitely done some upgrades, and I think it looks a little bit more robust. It's just slightly taller than the C70, which is, of course, a super 35mm camera system. They seem to have beefed up the top of the camera a little bit in terms of mounting and the true multi-shoe that is there for powering other devices. My understanding is it doesn't have the same USB-C port to be able to attach an external viewfinder the same way as a C400. And I would say that for both of those cameras, that for me is the thing that I wish had been a part of those cameras, was a built-in or an included or a cost-effective EVF for the cameras. Because quite frankly, once you start getting out into the outside world, having an electronic viewfinder can be a big advantage, though, of course, lots of shooters won't care about that. What they'll want is that now included SDI port, which will give additional monitoring options, whether you're using a third-party EVF or something like a high-nit external monitor, 5-inch, 7-inch, whatever you're going to use. So all in all, I think, just kind of thinking about the camera for the end user, Canon has done enough with this camera to make this compelling, especially for Canon users. I think that people who are in the Sony ecosystem that have made a big investment into cameras like the FX3, the FX6, the FX9, they're probably going to wait for the next revs of Sony's cameras. But if you're, again, in the Canon ecosystem, or you're just looking at the market as a whole, and you're somebody who's in small crew production, I don't think the decisions are any easier now than they used to be, but I do feel that we're just winning. right? You've got price drops on Komodo. You've got great offerings from most of the camera companies now, from the sort of $2,000 US to about the $7,500. We can go all the way up to about $10,000 US. That market has lots of choices for us now in terms of camera systems. If I were going out right now and saying that I didn't need hybrid for stills, because I've got plenty of stills cameras in that space that I can use for that, and I was looking for a digital cinema camera, the C80 for me is a very compelling camera system to look at, especially because of where the price point is. And I tend to lean towards trying to use cameras that have the same sensor. I don't always do it, but I try to, especially when I'm doing work like corporate interviews, things where I need two cameras to match and I don't want to deal with all of that stuff later on. Having built-in NDs up to 10 stops, having the same sensor in both of the camera systems, and having most of the same recording formats between the C400 and the C80 make a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying that I would go C400 and C80. I'd probably, most likely for the type of work that I do, unless I got into virtual production in a big way and needed gen lock, I would most likely go with the 2C80 route in terms of what I would do. But again, like I said, there's great offerings from lots of companies. So that's my stream of consciousness for today. Hopefully you're watching this at 2x speed, because it seems to work well in terms of these types of videos for me. Don't forget to, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Daily Drop.